You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, I'm trying to tell you what's going on here. It is exactly clear, folks. And you better understand how little they care about the American people. They only care about money. They're more than willing to give you and your family, to withhold cures from you, and to give you treatment that will give you cancer so they can make obscene amounts of money. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that these big pharmaceutical companies make, and they don't really care what happens to you. It's not just the FDA. It's the EPA as well. We're seeing these cases about glyphosate. Everybody in the world has banned glyphosate except the EPA. Friend of Monsanto, now owned by Bayer. The USA's EPA Pesticide Office has ignored its own established protocols to conclude that glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, does not cause cancer, finding that is at odds with the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer. It's at odds with the EPA's own Office of Research and Development. It's at odds with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. It's at odds with the juries that have found now in 3 particular cases, people were given cancer by using glyphosate. Awarding the juries, awarded 80 some odd million, 260 million, and now $2 billion in the third case. But of course, juries don't get to see evidence about vaccine injury and death. They gave immunity to the big pharmaceutical companies back in 1986. They've collected no data for over 3 decades. They were charged, HHS was charged with collecting data to make sure that vaccines were safe and effective, to make recommendations about that. And of course, they refused to turn over the information. When RFK Jr. sued them, found out that, oh, well, we've never collected any information over 3 decades, even though we were told to do that. We're going to guard the public safety, right? No, they're not. As a matter of fact, this article here, new study, U.S. uses 85 pesticides outlawed in other countries. U.S. EPA continues to allow the use of 85 pesticides for outdoor agricultural applications that are banned or in the process of being completely phased out elsewhere, including 72 in the EU, 17 in Brazil, 11 in China. So there's 72 different pesticides banned in the EU that the EPA doesn't ban. 11 that are banned in China that we don't ban. I mean, China doesn't really care at all about their people, but the EPA cares even less than the Chinese communists do about the health of their people. But the U.S. has only banned 4 pesticides that are still approved for use in the EU, Brazil, or China. So it's radically different. It's not just a difference in interpretation of this stuff. I said I quit taking my blood pressure medication. I found out that one of the 2 things that was prescribed for me was made in China. And as people were talking about the side effects, I said, well, it's got all these things come with their side effects, and you better pay attention to those side effects. Don't think it ain't going to happen to you. My mother was essentially paralyzed with a stroke because of an antibiotic she took. That was amazing. I've seen horrific effects in just 5 days with my wife taking a pain medication. Not opioids. We said, no, we're not doing any opioids. Well, try this one. This is safe and effective. It might give you a little bit of dizziness. Well, she passed out. Double vision. Mental fogginess. It took her days to get over it, just out of 5 days. So you better believe those side effects. They're there. They're real. They're there for a reason. It gives them plausible deniability. Just because the FDA approves something doesn't mean it's safe. That's our mentality, though. Well, the government's got my interest, right? They're keeping me safe. They're keeping me secure. I don't need to have the freedom. I don't need to use my mind to assess the risks. And of course, they'll just list those things there. They won't typically tell you what percentage of people come down with various things. But as I saw, one of these medications was made in China. It's like, I'm done with that. I'm happy to report my blood pressure is normal without them. Except when I talk about the FDA. I bet you put a cuff on me right now, you'd find my blood pressure up. This makes me very angry. And this is another thing that makes me very angry. Take a look at this hearing. Now, the FDA, just like we got California, they've legalized even recreational marijuana. First, they legalized medical marijuana, then they legalized recreational marijuana. At the federal level, it's now been declared legal to grow hemp, which doesn't have any THC, so it has no ability to get you high whatsoever. And so now it's legal to grow hemp. Hemp can be used for textiles. It can be used for a lot of different things, but it can be used for CBD. And so now the moneyed interests are worried about that, and they've got the FDA sniffing around CBD to stop it. And, of course, in California and Florida, they're coming after smoothie shots that are putting CBD in your smoothie. And here's what the FDA commissioner is now saying about something we all know is safe and effective. We've already done our own studies, FDA Commissioner Sharpless. Video 7.
CBD, modern-day cure-all or snake oil? Safe for lotions, coffee, and even Ben & Jerry's? Or untested drug that should be closely regulated? These were just a couple of questions raised today during an FDA hearing on CBD.
Overregulation will simply drive consumers to the black market.
The cannabis extract that has become the latest craze, even as doctors urge caution.
We are rapidly getting behind the curve in terms of what is happening in the real world and what patients are utilizing.
Over 100 speakers took the podium, from doctors to manufacturers to researchers, where one thing was for certain: there is lots of confusion. First, there are the laws. The federal government says hemp-derived CBD is legal, though it can't be added to food or dietary supplements. But state laws are an often conflicting patchwork. And then there are the many unproven claims that CBD can relieve
Hold it right there. You know when they say it's a regulatory patchwork, what they're saying is we need to centralize control of this. And we saw this with GMOs. We saw Monsanto and other corporations losing in local elections when the farmers understood how dangerous GMOs and glyphosates were. They said, no, we're not doing it. Even though they spent $8 million in one Hawaiian county, it didn't matter. They overruled the big corporations. So they said, well, we've got a patchwork of regulations, so we need to pull this into Washington. They call that the Dark Act. We called it the Dark Act, because they're going to say, we're going to sweep aside any state regulation of this. We're going to let the big corporations do whatever. It's very easy for the big corporations. They can't buy your votes as easily as they can the votes of the FDA commissioners. That's why they're doing this. Go ahead and play the rest of this report here.
CBD worked and was an absolute miracle.
And helped conditions like Alzheimer's and autism.
He's more relaxed. We see more attempts at communication. We get better eye contact.
There's only one CBD drug approved to treat epilepsy in children. The industry, which may be worth $20 billion by 2022, is described as the Wild Wild West. The FDA has a lot to do. Today was only the beginning.
Hold it right there.
So, Stephanie, how...
You hear that? It's described as the Wild Wild West. Folks, I like the Wild Wild West. I like freedom. Don't fence me in. FDA's got a lot to do to stop this Wild Wild West. Nobody is being hurt. As a matter of fact, the whole thing about the Wild Wild West was an invention of Hollywood. You want to go back and take a look at that. Take a look at the excellent book. What was it called? Gunfighters, Posses, or something. I can't. Highwaymen, something like that. I can't remember the book, but I remember what it said. It was very, very, very rare that anybody used their guns. Why? Because everybody had guns. If you pull out a gun and start shooting, everybody's going to be shooting back at you. And so, yeah, you did have occasional shootouts in the street, but they were conducted with the individuals who were concerned with that. And for the most part, you didn't have drive-by shootings. You didn't have innocent people being victimized because everybody was carrying a gun. They could defend themselves. As Colonel Arthur Fremantle of the Coldstream Guard said when he visited 3 months in the southern states during the Civil War, he said, everybody in the South is armed. It's the most polite society I've ever been in. Robert Heinlein condensed that and said an armed society is a polite society. That was the Wild Wild West. It wasn't so wild as it was free and polite. Folks, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Don't forget to take a look at the products that we have on sale at InfoWarsStore.com. We have all of our Force products on 50% off. We have Brain Force Plus, DNA Force Plus, Turbo Force, Ultimate Female Force Plus, all 50% off. Don't forget we have an exclusive special for listeners of this program. Just use the code DAVID to get an extra 20% off of Silver Bullet, our colloidal silver product. And don't forget to subscribe to Libertarian on YouTube and Twitter. Welcome back. We hear all this talk about, the CBD is just catching fire and all these people are using it and we've got to vet the claims. And it's like, no, you don't. It's not harmful. We can determine that. As a matter of fact, that's what Japan has done. And that's why they have been able to allow multiple new treatments with stem cells. They have a law where they said, you're going to have to prove to us that run some tests and show that this is not harmful, whatever it is that you want to do. And then as long as we understand that it's doing no harm, then we will let you sell this for 7 years, and you can then make a case as to whether or not it's effective. And if it's not effective, then we're going to stop you from selling it after 7 years, if you can't make a case that it's effective. First, you make a case that it's going to do no harm, and then you got 7 years to make a case that it is effective. Does that seem reasonable? But we're not going to do that in the United States. No, we're not going to do that at all. So they said, well, we've got a wild west here with CBD. Well, guess what? FDA, DEA, the rest of you, Americans have been doing their own experimentation for far longer than 7 years. You've had your war on drugs for nearly 50 years, and people have been using marijuana medically. They've been using CBD medically, and they're convinced that it works. We certainly know that it doesn't do any harm. And it's a plant. And yes, it is the Wild West, because the Wild West was about freedom, and you can't handle that, can you? Well, you better pay attention, because, we may wind up having a grassroots rebellion starting out west. I saw this article over the weekend. These tortoise-killing ravens are so smart that scientists must use drones to stop them. So now we're back to the desert tortoise. Do you remember the desert tortoise and how that was the justification to run the last farmer off of his ranch who'd been there before Nevada was a state? Way before the Bureau of Land Management, which isn't concerned anymore about managing the land. It's just concerned about running farmers off. And they had run off. They had more than 50 farmers in that area. Clive and Bundy's family was the last family there. And they were going to run him off. And they were using the desert tortoise as an excuse to do that. And so when they talk about how bad these things are, here's a story from the LA Times, came out over the weekend. It said in one instance, researchers counted 250 juvenile tortoise carcasses under a single nest over a 4-year period, according to federal wildlife officials. This is horrible. Over a 4-year period, 250 juvenile tortoise carcasses under this one nest. And so we look at this, and if you remember, the Bundy Ranch standoff, where they were saying, wow, these people and their cows are killing the desert tortoise. And as Clive and Bundy said, no, when there were 50 ranches out here, there were a lot more tortoises than there are now. And they actually had something of a symbiotic relation there with the cattle, a relationship with the cattle. They could actually get moisture from the excrement of the cows. And of course, the ranchers there, because they had property rights. They didn't own the land, but they owned the watering rights. They owned the grazing rights, and those are just as important, the mining rights and so forth. Those are rights that are just as tangible as your home, the title to your home. And so if you're not going to support property rights for ranchers and farmers and miners and loggers, then you're not going to have any property rights either. And they'd had these property rights for a very long time. And so to make those property rights more valuable, just like you might build an addition onto your home or dress it up to make it better, they put water features out there. All of that stuff helped the desert tortoise. But then they started to run this off because they wanted to take the land and then turn it over to large multinational corporations to build giant pits and extract minerals and so forth out there. We've seen this happen. Saw it happen in Arizona with John McCain. Taking an area that was the Tonto Reserve out there that was a place that had historical and cultural significance for the Indians. It was a recreational area, turned it over to a foreign mining corporation. They're going to strip mine that, create a crater so large you can see it from space. Oh, yeah, they're protecting the environment, of course. And so we were told, oh, yeah, we got to protect the environment. We got to protect these desert tortoises. And even though the preceding year, you had the Washington Post and others talking about how the federal funds were running out at the Desert Tortoise Conservation Center. Remember when Washington Post talked about that about a year, not quite a year, before they came after the Bundys. They said federal funds are running out at the Tortoise Conservation Center. Officials plan to close the site and to euthanize hundreds of tortoises that they've been caring for since the animals were added to the endangered species list in the 1990s. So you're concerned about 250 tortoise carcasses that you find over a 4-year period under this one nest, and yet the BLM, the protectors, they are euthanizing the tortoises under their care. And we reported that. Don Salazar's article from April of 2009, as they were coming after the Bundys, using that as an excuse. They said for several months now, the BLM has been euthanizing the tortoises in droves, even though they're using helicopters, not drones, to round up the Bundys' cattle, to steal their cattle. They were killing the tortoises under their care. They created this back in 1991. Their operating budget was $1 million. And they said, according to the tortoise recovery coordinator, he estimated that 50 to 60% of the facility's 1,400 tortoises were going to be euthanized. So, you're talking about more than 700 that they killed on their own. So, yeah, the wild, wild west. And, of course, one of the things that everybody's worried about, the wild, wild west, again, as I said, was guns. Bill Maher is talking about how liberals should learn more about guns before they try to ban them altogether. Here's a clip of Bill Maher. Let's do video clip number 2.
I'm getting the one that they think you are trying to take away, guns. That's about even. 40%.
No, we're trying to take away dead people.
No, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, except that guns are also used to defend life. And in your statistics,
I'm just telling you, as a winner issue. 40% trust Democrats, 41% trust Republicans on gun policy. It's a distinction a lot of people don't see. Trump was asked the other day by Piers Morgan when he was in London about guns. Piers Morgan is a terrible ass-kisser for Trump, but he actually challenged him on this. He's anti-gun, and he said, why do people need guns? And Trump said, a lot of them use it for entertainment. They go out and shoot, and Piers Morgan went, you find that entertaining? I don't either. I don't like guns, have some.
Yeah, that's not what the Second Amendment's about.
Them.
It's not about sporting.
For an emergency, like an antibiotic, don't like them. I don't polish my amoxicillin, I just have it. Okay, but some people do. Lots of people do. Right. And their view is, yes, there is a violence problem with guns, but not me. And you're going after me. And I'm just saying, some of the solutions, all of the solutions, I don't know if that would solve the gun problem. And to die on this hill and lose an election, because we've lost elections before on this issue, which is not a winning issue for Democrats. Just keep that in mind.
But what is the option, though? Not to make it a central part of the campaign?
No, but just, first of all, the liberals should learn more about guns. Right. I don't know much about guns because, again, I don't care. I don't like them. But I hear this from gun people.
They're fun.
You need to learn more about history, too.
I don't find them fun, but they do find them fun. But Cory Booker was on with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper asked him a couple of times, what in your plan would have stopped the massacre that we had last week at Virginia Beach? And Cory Booker took a very long time to not be able to answer that question.
But can I just say this?
It would not, because it was
journalists have to stop asking that horrible question. That is a horrible question.
Expose the
because what we're doing is picking out one incident out of 30,000 deaths per year and saying, how could you solve this one thing? That is not the objective of gun control. The objective of gun control is to reduce capacity to kill people who should not be killed. And once you reframe it that way.
Let's hold it right there. President Trump says, a lot of people like them. They think they're fun or whatever. It's not about recreation. It's not about sports. And it's not even about simply defending your life. It is also about understanding that you may need to defend yourself against the government. And when he talks about this, understand the logical fallacy here? Oh, well, let's not explain how these gun control laws would have helped in this instance. They didn't want to do that with any of them. That's how they just wave their hands and say, somehow we'll all be safe, even though I can't tell you exactly how. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
We're bringing back one of the biggest fan-favorite formulas we've ever offered with even better ingredients. Ultimate Bone Broth. InfoWars Life is proud to bring you a powerhouse bone broth formula to help push you to your limits. This incredible formula will help you get the most out of your workout with the power of ultra high-quality bone broth, one of the most popular health trends on the planet. Built with more than 7 different superfoods and crucial compounds, Ultimate Bone Broth will help support your healthy muscles, digestion, tendons, and ligaments, while also supporting your body's fight against free radicals. This incredible chicken bone broth formula contains time-tested ingredients such as turmeric root, chaga mushroom, goji berry powder, bee pollen, and alfalfa herb powder to support your body. It's time to experience what Ultimate Bone Broth can do for you. Get Ultimate Bone Broth now at 50% off.